Hello. Hi, and good evening, everyone. I'm Jay, and it is a privilege to welcome you all today. Thank you so much for taking out the time to join us today for annual Girish Sant Memorial Event 2026. This event is our way to keep Girish Sant's memories, ideas, and philosophies alive. As we honor his legacy, we must also pause to pay tribute to two other guiding lights we have lost. Tonight, we also remember Professor Naresh Dadich, one of India's leading physicists and a former director of IUCAA, who passed away on November 6th, 2025. He was a good friend of Prayas and guided us as a part of Energy Group's research and advisory council for many years. We are also deeply saddened for the loss of Preeti Karmarkar, a veteran feminist and committed gender equality advocate. A powerful communicator and excellent trainer, she worked tirelessly to support efforts to combat workplace sexual harassments and was a valued member associated with our internal committee. While we miss them dearly, we continue to be inspired by their contributions. For those new to our community, Prayas is a non-profit organization dedicated to the public interest, focusing on health and energy. It was founded in 1994 by Girish Sant and alongside with his close friends Dr. Vinay and Dr. Sanjeevani Kulkarni. Under Girish Sant's leadership, the Prayas Energy Group was established with a clear mission to democratize governments and protect the public interest in the energy sector. To carry this mission forward, with support from his family, friends, and well-wishers, this annual memorial event has been organized. Over the past years, we have hosted lectures and panel discussions with distinguished speakers covering diverse topics, from climate crisis through a health prism to people-centric energy transitions and the role of civil society. Last year, we had a panel discussion on comprehensive rights-based and affirmative sexuality education. Girish was a trailblazer in the energy sector, and he was also an inspiration to the young. So beyond these events, a research fellowship is offered to those starting their journey in energy policy, and we are accepting new applications now. 6 such fellowships have been awarded so far. You can visit our website for more information. This brings us to today. We are here to discuss digital public infrastructure and public service delivery. We have a stellar panel joining us today. Rakshita Swami, Vijay Sai Pratap, and Apar Gupta. Srihari Dukkipati from Prayas Energy Group will be guiding the conversation today. Before we initiate the panel discussion, Srihari will set the context and introduce the panelists. And finally, after the discussion concludes, a vote of thanks will be given by Preetam from Prayas Health Group. A few quick housekeeping rules before we begin. For those in the hall, if you have any questions for the panelists, please write them down on a paper slips available with the volunteers and hand them back. You can identify the volunteers wearing the badge. For the people joining online, please type your questions in the Q&A window. And finally, I kindly request everyone to keep your cell phones on silent mode. Thank you once again for joining us today, and I now hand over the session to Srihari. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Srihari Dukkipati. I've been with Prayas since 2011, and I'll be spending about 5 to 7 minutes setting the context for today's discussion, and then I will introduce the panelists and invite them onto the stage. So the rapid spread of information and communication technologies has, over the last 2 or 3 decades, has transformed the way people communicate with each other and consume entertainment and information, and also earn a livelihood. A lot of this was possible due to computing and network infrastructure becoming faster, denser, and cheaper. But a lot of it was also due to the role of an open internet, which was built on a layered architecture with open protocols and standards, which allowed a lot of people to participate in the internet and a lot of innovation to also happen, because of which the internet has spread in such a pervasive manner, if that's the right word. These advances also led to e-governance initiatives, such as digitizing government records, bringing government services closer to the public, closer to the citizens' doorsteps. Digital public infrastructure, or DPI, builds on this ubiquitous nature of digital systems to provide a set of shared, secure, and interoperable systems, of course, governed by certain rules, policies, and regulations that provide a basis for to deliver equitable access to all citizens and to enable provisions of provisioning of services at population scale. This is, in some sense, the idea is quite similar to how what one thinks of the internet and how it has enabled a lot of sort of communication and so on to happen. In India, DPI has its roots in the initially to have a unique identity for all citizens, and also to sort of deliver welfare to a large section of the population in a more effective manner. At least that's the intent that all of this started with. It started with the JAM Trinity, which stands for Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile, to enable direct benefit transfer to beneficiaries of welfare programs such as rural employment, public distribution system, rations, etc., and of course LPG subsidy and many other sort of subsidies that are provided by governments. Banking reached remote parts of the country, even though physical banks, it was not viable for physical banks to go there. Of course, there are many reasons that we can talk about for all of that. But essentially two other fundamental blocks: one, the Unified Payment Interface, UPI, for payments, and what is called the account aggregator for sharing, consent-based sharing, data sharing. These also were added and promoted several other services to be built on top of this. Given strong push, particularly from the union government, these systems scaled up quite fast. And by 2025, we have about 1.42 billion Aadhaar IDs, and on a monthly basis, about 18 billion transactions over UPI. Due to the modular nature of the architecture, and it is sort of considered to be purpose agnostic. During the COVID pandemic, COVID vaccination program was managed through the CoWIN platform, which was built on top of this infrastructure. And with the expansion of more and more areas in which sectors being covered, we are seeing this being used in health, energy, education, agriculture, name it. All of the sectors there is talk of DPI being used in those sectors. However, what we are focusing on today is on one of the central reasons for DPI to pick up in India, and that is to deliver welfare in an effective manner by minimizing the friction points and leakages in the system. As more and more benefits are being delivered through DPI, there are growing concerns of exclusion. Issues such as incorrect Aadhaar linkages, spelling errors, blocked accounts result in benefits not being reaching the, the intended beneficiaries. And in some cases, for example, in rural employment, the payments are not commensurate to the work that has been undertaken, and work is not allocated even when there is demand for it. So some of the issues that had existed prior to digital technologies continue to exist. For example, in the case of PDS, it has been reported that there continues to be discretionary denial of and quantity fraud of the rations being provided, and hence the expectation that digital systems would sort of prevent corruption and so on is not been seen on the ground. These issues of exclusion remain unresolved also due to the opaque nature of the systems that are deployed, that are powering DPI, and because of the absence of a path to recourse, since the mechanisms for beneficiaries to access the official machinery are either non-existent or impersonal. Fixing accountability for these exclusions is also difficult because of the faceless nature of the technology, and the multitude of agencies that are involved that one has to approach. Thus, many benefits do not reach the people for whom they are intended still, even after all these technologies being deployed, who are already marginalized and lack the means to pursue these issues any further. In today's conversation, we hope to deliberate on some of these aspects and of DPI in particular, but also digital technologies in general, and how they can impact both positively as well as negatively, provide provision of welfare to a large population that is still needed in a country like India. So we will talk about some of the systemic issues that existed before and that continue to exist after the digital technologies have been deployed, and talk about some of the measures that can help sort of resolve some of these issues. And perhaps we'll also have a lot of open questions that will be posed, and certain food for thought for you all to think about and process. To discuss all of these issues, we have an excellent panel of people who have been working in the field for many years on both the aspects that are affecting the communities, as well as the various processes that are underway in the policy, legal, and regulatory arena. We will also hear about people-oriented technologies and how those could be conceptualized in a more democratic manner. Before I invite them onto the stage, I will briefly introduce them. I'm sure you'll know more about their work as they speak here and share their experiences and their thoughts with us. So I'll keep the introductions brief. As I introduce them, I request the panelists to please come onto the stage, and so that we can start the panel discussion. Rakshita Swamy is founder and director of Social Accountability Forum for Action and Research, or SAFAR, where she works with governments and civil society to design and institutionalize social accountability mechanisms. She works at the intersection of law, advocacy, and research to help people claim their rights, improve public institutions, and deepen democratic and participatory governance. If you can please come onto the stage. Vijay Sai Pratap is co-founder. Vijay Sai Pratap is co-founder and CEO of Gramvani, a social technology enterprise building community-based digital public platforms and tools for marginalized communities. He has over 23 years of experience in telecom as well as information and communication technologies for development, ICT 4D, and views technology as an enabler of equitable access to information, services, and justice. Vijay, please, if you can please come on. Apar Gupta is a lawyer and speaks and writes extensively on democracy and technology. He has served as counsel in landmark constitutional cases on free speech and privacy. Apar also co-founded the non-profit SaveTheInternet.in, mobilizing over 1 million Indians to secure net neutrality in India. The campaign led to the formation of Internet Freedom Foundation, where Apar is founder director and leads IFF's campaigns, policy advocacy, and litigation on digital access and coercion. Apar, if you can please come. Before we begin, I would just like to mention that we will have a few rounds of discussion, after which we'll open up the audience Q&A round. And as Jay mentioned, if you can please pass on your questions to the volunteers, we will take them up towards the end, in the last half an hour or so. So, to begin with, I would like the speakers to set the context for the discussion today, in terms by explaining to us their work, what is the nature of their work, how they interact with various communities, whether it's the local communities or policy, regulatory, legal communities, and how they see digital technologies playing a role in their area of work. I would like to start with Rakshita to take it from here. Thank you.
It's very nice to be here, and thank you, and I hope we can have more conversations after this particular discussion is over. So I work, like Thierry mentioned, I work with an organization called Social Accountability Forum for Action and Research. We try and sort of demonstrate procedures, platforms, methods by which government, state, power can be more accountable towards people. And the understanding is that there's no disagreement in, at least in terms of saying, between people who, where this contest lies, that yes, power needs to be more accountable, state needs to be more accountable, transparent, but a lot is in the details of how will that actually take place, how can a mining project be more accountable and transparent to communities affected most by it. And so how that would look very different from what, say, a rural employment guarantee program's accountability framework would look like. And a large focus, and I'll come to how so much of our work has had to, not by choice initially, has had to engage with digital public infrastructures. It's also that just accountability itself needs to be imagined from the point of view of the most historically marginalized. And even a conversation between the most powerful people, maybe they would all agree that yes, we are accountable, because accountability structures tend to flow upward in our hierarchy. But when it has to flow downward, and essentially to the one who is suffering the most because of that lack of accountability, then systems and processes need to look, will start appearing and looking very differently. So that's the sum of what we keep trying to do, and that's why we're sometimes a pest to government, sometimes we're a resource to groups, and we really feel it's a collective effort, and that's why so much of what I have to share and have been given the opportunity to talk about also comes from collective experiences and struggles with so many different people, campaigns, and I just have the platform today to share it with everybody, so it's coming from a collective samaj. A couple of things that I just wanted to, should I open those threads of conversations now? Okay, a couple of things very quickly before I get into more details of, at least from my area of work, how this kind of a conceptual understanding has begun, because I do want to be able to share why is it that we are thinking this particular way, is actually we really feel at this point, and that's, we were joking during coffee when we met before, that if you want me to start in that sense, that it will be quite, I'm going to break that bubble right away. The assumption that we all, that is thrown at us about digital public infrastructure being like an essential public infrastructure is something that we have all consumed and are moving along. And that assumption and premise itself needs to be unpacked and interrogated, which I hope this conversation will help us to. So this constant analogy of DPI is like a road, is like a highway, is like a school, is like a hospital, it's that essential a public infrastructure is what is told to us. And it's only when we start asking these questions of who demanded who demanded for this DPI, who called it a DPI, who's benefiting from DPI, who are the ones who are getting the most harmed from DPI. If we start asking these questions and interrogating these assumptions, it is actually quite clear what's going on. And I hope, again, this conversation will take us in that direction. Our own understanding of applications of DPI in the world of welfare, where government has constitutional statutory responsibilities to deliver certain services, goods, run certain institutions, it comes from there. So it's, I am putting out that disclaimer of my understanding of DPI is really coming from that space where we're looking at the interaction between a citizen and a state. And we have understood that DPI is really an essential infrastructure, definitely for the market and for the state and market nexus. Never before, actually, in the history of where we're seeing this nexus operate, are we really able to see the ability of having a unique identified individual and that individual's engagement with payments when they use UPI, when they travel through DigiYatra, when they're receiving their pension or Narega benefit through their Aadhaar-enabled bank account, where it's your individual and their interface with different activities. You actually have a framework that has been created, not by the force of state, not by using violence, but through a constitutional democratic process. And the implications that this kind of a captive market has on the paradigm of extractive capitalism is really something that we have started seeing, understanding, and I will, like I said, speak about more. That if it was ever, which we really don't see much of it, but if it was ever a fair competitive economy in an ecosystem of imperfect information, this kind of getting together a viable data set that is your market in perpetuity has implications on how we even understand the future of capitalism the way we know it. And lastly, I just want to end with the way we are understanding DPI, the way it is shown to us, it was very clear to those, the makers, the thinkers, and those who are conceptualizing this, that it would not work unless everybody was on board. That it could not be a system left to choice. If you like it, get an Aadhaar. If you don't like it, don't get it. If it was left to that, this scheme would never work. It was clear that everybody had to be on it, and coercion was built into it by design. You had to make it mandatory for all these kinds of programs so that you had 90% of your country onto an infrastructure. Did they ever demand for it? Is a question that I'm leaving. And really lastly, when they do say, you'll hear all kinds of statements being made, it is just a highway, it is a neutral technology, we have created the highway and then plugins will be determined as per use case is relevant. But really then if it is a highway, it is actually no exaggeration to say that this highway is being built on the bodies of the poor. And there are people who've died, there are people who've been excluded, been denied their rights because of failures of DPI, and we'll talk more about that.
Coming to, thank you Rakshita. Coming to Vijay Sai, you have worked in technology, building bottom-up technologies which serve the community needs. If you can talk a little bit about your work and how it has, how you've seen the need and then grew it into a large community-based sort of system.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Sherry. Again, absolutely privileged to be part of this event, offering my respects to Shri Girish Sant, and I'm sure the principles that he's lived by are represented here in these conversations as well. So I represent an organization which has worked, Gramvani, which has worked at the intersection of communities, technology and development, right? So in our democratic structures, the constitution, citizen participation, citizen engagement is given a lot of importance, right? So, but when we look at participatory democracy or participatory methods, the most marginalized, the most underserved communities whose voices have to be heard, whose voices should matter when policies are made, when programs are implemented, when we celebrate the success or the failure or discuss the failures of any interventions, their voices should be represented on those tables, right, of those discussions. Now, whether it's climate change, whether it is Manrega, whether it is new policies that have been designed for them. But unfortunately, most of these communities who we are talking about and for whom policies are apparently being made, they're not represented at those tables. Their voices are not available at those tables, right? So Gramvani has been working towards, with a mission to reverse the flow of information, right? When we're looking at communities and their voices to be represented, it involves the process of firstly informing them, building their awareness about programs, schemes, so having a shared understanding about social issues, and ensure that using the shared understanding, they're able to build an opinion, reflect, and also express and collectivize around local issues, right? And not take a very top-down sort of an approach. When these voices matter, and if these voices matter and in terms of designing programs, policies, interventions, there need to be spaces where those voices are sort of expressed, where those voices are captured, where those voices are also amplified. And unfortunately, top-down media does not work that way, right? Social media has its own share of problems, right? It creates a lot of echo chambers. The objectives are very different. So what Gramvani has been doing is creating what we call as digital community commons, right? Community-based conversation spaces wherein it uses appropriate technology tools. We use voice as a medium where people even with simple feature phones can give a missed call to a number, they get a call back from a platform, and they listen to content in the local language, right? And the platform enables people to express themselves, record their views, thoughts, opinions, perspectives, grievances, and all this is anchored within the communities, wherein communities own these platforms, which is why they're called as digital community commons, and they're represented by who we call as community volunteers or community development entrepreneurs. When we look at any development program intervention that we apparently plan or implement or design for these communities, if we want these interventions to sustain, community participation is absolutely important. Community ownership is absolutely important. It would be a disservice to believe that we understand their context and we can go and solve their problems. And if community ownership is extremely important, then we need to enable and facilitate and capacitate them with the right tools, with the ability to use data for decision making rather than use these layers just for data collection, right? And that is what Gramvani has been working towards. In the context of social welfare delivery, what Gramvani has realized is through our work of experience for the past 15 plus years is that community voices matter. And when we are looking at social welfare delivery, it includes not just about designing policies or programs, but firstly questioning, like Rakshita rightly said, in terms of what is the purpose of that program or policy, right? Who is it benefiting, right? Are the existing channels available and capable of taking those benefits to the right target user groups, right? So I think from that perspective, Gramvani has realized that it's not just about DPI is more of an infrastructure. It is not the outcome, right? If it is an infrastructure, then we need to be able to build the right rails. And Gramani has been building the participatory layer, which is about the last mile connect to the right target user group so that communities can participate, express themselves, learn about these programs, policies in the language that they can relate to, in the context that they can sort of fit into and understand, and more importantly, question and hold systems accountable. So DPIs are an infrastructure in many ways, right? It is not the outcome. It is not a device. It is a set of standards that we are talking about. And that's fundamentally what Gramani has been working towards, is creating this technology plus human assisted, human supported, community owned aspect, what we call as community based digital public infrastructure. And that's what differentiates what we do as almost like an additional layer to the current DPI narrative. And unfortunately, that's not spoken enough about, that's not sort of acknowledged enough about in terms of its importance, but that's fundamentally what we strongly believe and have had the conviction based on our work in the past 20 plus years.
Thank you, Vijay. I'll now turn to Apar to share some of his thoughts on based on the work that you've been doing in both in the legal space, but also fighting for digital rights, inclusion, and in several other aspects like privacy and so on. Based on that, how do you see how digital technologies or DPI in particular are interface with social welfare programs and so on?
So my journey starts out in Internet Freedom Foundation from a online movement which was to prevent the internet, which is actually a digital public infrastructure in many ways, has led to our lives being improved in so many ways, but at the same point in time also created fresh problems. So born in 1984, the same year, the very famous George Orwell, and I claim him as an Indian, okay, is written, or that's the year Edward Snowden is born, or Indira Gandhi is assassinated. I have seen the waves of technology. I've gone due to my high privilege accessing internet from a dial-up modem, which changed from 28.8, 14.4. I've seen shell. So technology, the way it's standing today, and digital public infrastructure, the way it's interacting with us today, is a promise which is being offered to us to augment state capacity in a welfare model, which is quite often not resulting in the kind of delivery which I want. And this connects to the mission of IFF very closely, because IFF was founded as an organization because after I did the Save the Internet movement and was one of its co-founders, there was a need which was realized that why is there no advocacy organization which works on technology and does it full time? You had a lot of research organizations, right? And a lot of times the research which is done does not reach the people. Even people who stay in cities, who have smartphones, who have television, who read the newspapers. It has to be made in a way which is easy for people to engage in a policy process. And it's not only people who are affected in the worst possible way, who are disenfranchised from these processes, but even the Indian middle class is largely apathetic to whatever policies are being formed. So we filed a RTI, for instance, recently on the various regulations which have been made under the Telecom Act. They govern how interception will be done, the internet will be shut down, core questions which should affect millions of people, right? And the number of responses which have been sent by organizations has been in double digits, the low double digits, 9 to 11, 12, 14. A lot of them are corporate entities, the telecom companies itself. So again, I'll come back to the mission of IFF. The mission of IFF is to protect civil liberties and social justice. We use 3 axes of work. The first is civic literacy. We make what we work on public. We talk about it very openly, and we hope to make it engaging, which is why our reels sometimes on DigiYatra get 700K views. It's not a bad thing. We do it well. Number 2 We do policy advocacy. This does not mean participating in a public consultation like a checkbox. It means bringing the public pressure which is needed to make sure that you can get the best result which is possible, to make sure that the government department realizes that it is losing political capital rather than gaining it by bringing out a policy, which sometimes leads to the rollback of an app such as Sanchar Sathi, which may also be a digital public infrastructure. Third, when all of this fails, we hopefully go to the courts, which sometimes is a roulette table. However, sometimes we do win. Laws are struck down, safeguards are brought about. But all of this builds upon the work and the learnings of people who are being impacted by DPI every day. And here it becomes very important for us to understand the words infrastructure and public. What does it mean? Because today we are in a, there's no scarcity of access to new words, but words have stopped having the meaning we would imagine them to have. What do I mean by this? What is the difference between democracy and democratization? Because I hear more about democratization than I hear about democracy. So I'll go back to what is infrastructure. Infrastructure essentially means something which is shared, which can be put to multiple uses. And the minute I say it, a lot of people start visualizing a road, a power grid, or something which is shared in a way, right? Secondly, what is public? Who is the public? And the public presumes, to some extent, a representative of the public which holds it. Given that all of us can't hold one share each in an infrastructure, it will be the government. And how will the government hold it? Through a law, quite often, right? In a democratic framework. So it becomes important for us to think about digital public infrastructure from this lens, because many of the deployments of digital public infrastructure are fashioned as techno-legal deployments in terms of their safeguards. But there's no underlying legal authority on the basis of which they are made. They are not uniquely through public corporations or statutory corporations, as was done conventionally, and thereby do not have the safeguards, do not have the accountability processes. The RTI Act is inapplicable. You do not know how much is being spent, and you feel a coercive force beyond its adoption. And I can go with deployment after deployment, which goes beyond the three which we talk about, which is Aadhaar, UPI. What is the third one you like? But have you heard about, or have you thought about Arogya Setu? Have you thought about CoWIN? Have you thought about GEM? I will talk about GEM also a little bit. So there is a website called indiastack.global, where these DPIs are nested. And through the course of our conversation, I would like to go into greater detail about them and to think about what role should technology play much more broadly, not only digital public infrastructure. Before I end, I'd just like to say that this connects to what is being voiced earlier. It's not as if that technology itself, the way it is being made top down, is a uniquely fresh problem which emerges within technology. There are books, for instance, Grass Without Roots, written by L.C. Jain, which surveys the execution of how agricultural policies have been made in India. It's in the 1980s it's published. And the conclusion is the same. The way the policy is designed and implemented, there is no buy-in from the farmers and the farmer groups, which is why it's not succeeding. So technology will not fix when we do not use it for the purposes it is built for. And quite often, it may be a mythology. It may work sometimes, like the internet as well. It may work in so many ways, for instance, video conferencing. But video conferencing may not work if it is used for education, primarily for elementary students. Hence, we have to be objective, we have to be rational, we have to be scientific, rather than being dogmatic, euphoric, and evangelical about digital public infrastructure. Thank you.
So in the next round, I would like to take a slightly different turn from what we had talked about earlier, going by the comments that have been made. if we forget about digital infrastructure for the time being, and talk about the touch points between sort of the people and the state, and talk about how in each of the your areas, what is sort of like an ideal way for those for this to play out in the field. For example, with Rakshita, you have worked on social accountability a lot, and the right to information itself has come out of a lot of the work that that has happened, for example, in Rajasthan and so on. If we can talk a little bit about what are those basic elements that need to be there for social welfare programs to actually be done in a way that the benefits reach those that they are intended for. If you can please. Yeah.
Yes. So of course, this is not to say, and I will reserve a part of my time towards the end to also say that this is not, I mean, the critique is not coming from a set of people who, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but at least for ourselves, it's not coming from a set of people who are anti-technology, who think it cannot help in anything at all. That is certainly not what we are saying, and reducing a critique to something as stupid as that would be a disservice. And there is nuance, there is difference between digitizing records, automating, and there's a difference between that and doing away with physical processes and actually demanding that these only be done now virtually. So there is a lot even within vocabulary that needs to be spelt out. And I do want to come to this idea of, yes, there are a set of accountability practices, methods that really must be exercised on any use of power and any use of force. But I really feel that in this situation, and I do want to constantly remind ourselves collectively of really the terrible situation that we are in. It is not, yes, the basic minimum requirement of whatever is happening must be disclosed in the public domain. Who are the people that the contracts are going to? What are performance rates? What are failure rates? A lot of the accusations that sort of the tech companies, the state actually puts to people to say, when we go with grievances, they're saying, what is the proof? You tell us how many such cases, and we say the burden of proof can't be on us, it has to be on you. You introduce this platform, you have to prove to us that this is better than anything else. So of course, constant access to information which is put out proactively in the public domain, time-bound, decentralized methods through which anyone who is affected as an individual or collectively as a group of persons must have to file grievances and demand answers. Grievances must result in legally sanctioned outcomes. These are not just grievances that result in a performance rating of 1 to 10, but actually result in sanctioned outcomes. Somebody needs to be penalized, somebody needs to be compensated, somebody needs to be suspended. So there are a set of, and of course the constant public oversight on whether, and not just of the parliament, of the judiciary, but how do people on a daily basis, which is what the whole methodology of social audits has always taught us, that it's people need to be inspecting government. It's not the job of a committee or an institution to only be inspecting what's happening in the name of people. But I do want to qualify that in the case of DPI, we cannot even, our pursuit of seeking accountability can't just be reduced to as a de facto introducing these mechanisms, because then we are agreeing to what has happened to us and are not questioning the basic motive behind this. And that is why I really feel for the loop of accountability to be completed, one has to go back to why was this even brought in the first place? What proof did we have that this was the best way to do this? And there are instances of, and the ability of instrumentalities or infrastructures like Aadhaar to centralize information, the ability for, and it's actually not wise to see developments like Aadhaar, Digital Personal Data Protection Act as very separate things. You have one ecosystem which ensured that every single individual is converted into a number and every individual's activities are put on a kind of a digital grid. It's digitalized everything. Then you brought a legislation that says now that it is digital, it must be denied from people themselves in the name of privacy. And of course, the DPDP Act allows the government and the private sector to be exempt by the force of government itself. So you are seeing the layering that's happening, and it is a fight for information that it's centralized, it is digitalized, and then it is hidden from you in the name of your privacy. Whereas those who one should be afraid of in terms of who is misusing data for surveillance, who is misusing data for commercial use are actually the state and the private sector, and we have no protections against that. But I do, like I'll say towards the end, in the last round, I do want to offer illustrations of where campaigns, movements, networks have fought, have reclaimed digital technology and demonstrated what it can look like if the design is in the hands of people who are most affected by exclusions. And there are portals, there's the gig law that is being fought for, there's all of that. But lastly, because so much of these, it may seem these are very big rhetorical statements, but they're really coming from very grounded understanding and watching of what's happening in programs like NREJ, now erstwhile NREGA to be very soon, where we have seen the kind of experimentation done on a program which has 13 crore active job card holders, which is spending an average of 90,000 crores a year. You are seeing how requirement of Aadhaar enabled payment systems have led to kinds of wage delays and exclusion, and studies have pointed out, and when wage delays, the part that DPI was supposed to help for, which is the part where once measurement of work has been taken, once the actual work has been completed, fund transfer orders are generated, the part where the DPI is actually now supposed to take over and deliver, we're seeing that, and groups like Liptech India have done research and have analyzed 3.2 crore transactions and shown that more than 60% of those transactions are delayed because of DPI's inadequacy. So what is the point of building such sophisticated pipelines when the core problem is inadequate funding? You're not putting enough water through the pipeline, and then there's this all paraphernalia of building the most sophisticated pipeline. So the problem is one place, but the tech is being introduced as a solution to a problem that they're now trying to identify. Yeah, but I'll pause now.
Yeah. So just turning to you, Vijay, I think Rakshita had talked about a lot of the issues with this sort of top-down technology being sort of imposed and perhaps layered on systems that already had a lot of challenges in achieving their objectives. Can you take us through a little bit about how you go about engaging with communities and how technology has actually helped in this case with the people who needed support in terms of accessing their benefits or and so on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Sherry. So let me just take maybe a couple of examples, right? So during the COVID, there were many schemes that were launched where DBT, which is direct benefit transfer, was assured for the citizens or the communities who are impacted most, right? So, and those programs were announced, and the dashboard showed that money was transferred, and that a lot of people benefited. But when you go down to the ground, when Gramvani's community platforms, which are voice platforms that people can use, they call these numbers, they listen to content, they understand about various interventions that are happening, and they also share their grievances, right? So we had within a few weeks of the program implementation, thousands of cases that came about where people said that they did not get the money that was assured or promised them, right? And with the help of our community entrepreneurs, community volunteers, who then use these community voices as an evidence to then talk to the concerned authorities, figure out where the problem is, identify where the choke point was, right? So they then identified that most of those failures that happened in terms of the benefits that was to be that these people were to have received was because of rejections, because of Aadhaar authentication, or in terms of the bank KYC not having been done properly, or some mismatches in terms of their identity, and all these, or even in terms of manual errors in terms of data entry, right? So many of these kind of errors, again layering on the digital public infrastructure that we're talking about, led to many people not getting the benefits that they were ideally supposed to have got in that kind of a difficult time, right? And the way Gramvani's community entrepreneurs or community volunteers then were able to navigate that is by using this body of data, which is the evidence of these thousands of calls that we received with grievances that were recorded on our platform, to use that for driving accountability, to talk to the concerned authorities, reach out to the right grievance redressal mechanisms, and help get those problems resolved. You realize the point that it is, so we are talking about technology. Gramvani builds technology, right? Gramvani uses technology. So, which is what Rakshita rightly said. It's not like we're saying, we're not anti-technology. The question is that, is it technology, techno-utopianism, or are you being realistic about how technology should be applied and where, right? It's about contextual application of technology. It is about the appropriateness of technology. Identifying who you are applying the technology for. What is the purpose and use of technology in solving? Is it the problem that we've identified in conjunction and in discussion with the target communities, and based on that building solutions rather than the other way around? So based on this experience that I'm talking about, the work that we're talking about, we were able to combine human capacity and intent with appropriate technology to solve this particular problem. And that's fundamentally what we're saying, where we say, it's about saying that how do you build those accountability structures? How do you make these systems more participatory? How do you create feedback loops, right? Any DPI or any technology is as good as the feedback loop that it provides. And that's fundamentally how our approach has helped solve many of the grassroots level issues, by combining community participation, community ownership, community intent, and collaborating and leveraging appropriate technology tools to bridge the last mile gaps.
In some sense, if I were to, what Gramvani is doing in terms of building these systems of grievance redressal mechanisms, or even, for example, mechanisms like social audit, proactive disclosures, etc., that you had briefly mentioned about. These are systems that are needed irrespective of whether we have how the delivery is happening, right? In terms of whether it's through DPA, digital technologies, or other mechanisms that were used in the past. So in some sense, these are sort of necessary systems that are accountability systems that are needed in place for welfare to work, right? Whether it is digital or not. If we add now digital technologies and DPI into the picture, one question, and Apar, I would like to ask you about this, is how do we make, is there a way, I mean, of course I understand the point that both of you have made, that were these accountability measures that are needed for social welfare to happen, they are also needed for tech infrastructure like DPI.
Yes.
If you can talk a little bit about that, and also if you would like touch upon some of what you had just mentioned a little while ago, which is how do people engage with policy process, and if you can talk about that specifically with respect to policies related to digital technologies, that would be really.
So I think I'll start with the policy processes because it's a little easy for me to talk about it. So by and large, the digital public infrastructure deployment has been done as a framework of technical development, where it's been thought more from the perspective of how do we build this? And builders are usually the people who are the engineers who get to code it and think about the system design. This is well illustrated even for very high priority projects which are there. For instance, if you think about Arogya Setu, which was a contact tracing application which required, or which would enable social distancing, thereby preventing the spread of the COVID-19. So think about it, if that app is completely developed without any clear ministry taking ownership of it, without involving people who come from studying vaccination epidemiology. There were no people who were part of its development. There's a list of authors who are there. There are 2 lawyers, I think so. The rest are technical people who have built Arogya Setu, and that's what's there. And they rolled it out. And there are notifications by the ministry basically saying that it's mandatory, right? And it also carried certain other consequences, right? When you deploy technology in a way in which the policy process itself is non-existing, then it results in outcomes which are sometimes not foreseeable, because that's what a policy process is. It's inviting people who have different points of view so you can look across the corner, right? They come from a different life experience. The second thing I think which is important for us to recognize about policy processes is that there's something on the PDF and there's something which is implemented, especially in technical deployments. So, for instance, if you look at the DPI subgroup's report on the G20 summit, which was a track which internationalized DPIs, particularly for South Asia and the developing world as a part towards development, which all of us want, right? We want more people to live healthier, happier, longer lives. And if technology does it, why not, right? So, there's an entire subgroup, and one of the first things which it talks about is transparency. However, we do know what is our experience with transparency around government decision makings, particularly around the RTI Act, which has recently been really undermined by amendment by the data protection law, which does not have an exemption for journalists, which was there earlier. And the National Economic Survey just 2 days ago calls for a complete review of the transparency law, saying that it's slowing down decision making. This is the mismatch I want to illustrate between a policy document which is there and the actual practice as it's existing. And the second thing in this is that there's a greater degree of opacity, because DPI changes quite often through code, which is not documented that the code has changed, the platform has changed, right? There's obscurity. For instance, the National Transgenders portal is still down. We wrote to the ministry to bring it back up. They brought it up on a Monday after we tweeted about it. Then it again went down on Wednesday, and it's remained down. This is all publicly documented. I can even highlight how things are being done in other platforms where software code versions are pushed, right? And you don't know what's being changed, when it's being changed. And at the very least, the large Silicon Valley tech corporations, which I hate from the bottom of my heart, at least have a change log attached. Any engineer would say, why don't you have a change log? So there's a disconnect between the policy and the implementation completely, and sometimes it does not exist. The second thing I just wanted to come to is the other part of your question, which is on basically when you think about DPI in a way, how does it work and who does it work for? Quite often when we look at welfare. So Maharashtra has its own rollout and version of the Ladki Behna scheme, right, where a cash disbursement is given to women who fall under certain economic criteria. And this was rolled out prior to the state elections. There's a great EPW article by Yamini Iyer and Nilanjan Sirkar, which calls this techno-patrimonialism, that basically this is not with welfare, this is basically a bribe, and it's a tribal allegiance which is being built rather than a state beneficiary scheme, and this carries a huge amount of risk in a welfare state. Putting that aside, you know how the scheme works today. The OTP goes to the male member in that family, thereby you know why? Who has the mobile phone in the family? This is all practicality of DPI, but what does it end up doing? Who will get that money, even if it goes in the woman's account? So these are the larger questions we need to ask ourselves, move beyond the headlines, and I think DPI can indeed benefit people, but it will benefit people who have power more. COVID. Who did COVID benefit? The regression analysis showing that men who were based in metropolitan cities and were English speaking of a higher income group got vaccinated first. There were less women who got vaccinated. And this was at the height of the second wave. This was when COVID was mandatory. So we need to open our eyes when we look at the dashboard and we look at the rate of vaccinations which are done. And we also need to remember, and I'll come back to vaccination, that India has had a pulse polio program. We have fought and we have won without technology, right? So we have to think about DPI more objectively, not as a mythology, not as a religion. We have to think about it as just an artifact. And can it fix it? Can it not fix it? And then think about the harms which are being caused by it rather than forcing ourselves to fit within the conception of that technology. Then it will really work. I really think it will work well.
But the other way also can work, right? Which is that the technology itself has to fit within what we consider as appropriate for systems, government systems to play. For example, as much as we talk about transparency and accountability, there needs to be transparency about, for example, transaction failure rates when it comes to Aadhaar, which are not put out, and they have to be put out in a way that is disaggregated by demographics and so on. So that is also something that's sort of missing in this whole thing.
And it was being done for some years. There was a state of Aadhaar report when the constitutional case was going on in the Supreme Court. It was published for 2 years, which did even catalog the exclusions which were being done in certain ways, not the error transactions, because exclusion is a much more, it's a bigger hammer blow, right? And the thing is that exclusions now are being cataloged by LibTech and a few researchers in some journals, but you don't have this institutionalized support for it. The National Economic Survey, which did cite these exclusion reports for certain years, have stopped doing it altogether when the entire backbone of the Digital India program, the DPI framework, rests on digital identity. So I do think it's important. We can do better.
Yeah.
And one other thing that you had mentioned, and I think Vijay Sai also referred to, about technology itself and about how the rollout of the technology itself is done in an opaque manner. What do you think that, what is the role of open source in such technologies? Is that something that you think should be mandated because these are supposed to be public systems, and would that help in some way as in terms of how these systems would play out in the field?
No, absolutely. I mean, see, again, open source, one is, of course, are we looking at solving problems by tech or code optimization or institutional structures, right? Institutional structures or accountability measures or proactive grievance redressal mechanisms, right? So these are two elements of this whole DPI narrative. When we are looking at code optimization, tech optimization, when we are looking at leveraging open source, software, using open standards, I think some of those core principles have to. That's almost like a non-negotiable in many ways. But open source code means nothing if its actual implementation structures are not sort of grounded, more importantly, right? So I think a very important aspect that we've also often spoken about at Gramvani when we talk about community-based technology platforms is, one, when we're talking about building with the communities. It is not just about user-centric design, right? So first is in terms of identifying the purpose of the solution or technology we're building, and are we doing it in a democratic way by engaging with the target user groups or communities we're intending to build it for. Point number 2 is the participation of communities in the design of and development of technology, right? Which is where the questioning, which is why it's an iterative process, which means you have to be nimble, you have to be humble enough to understand that you cannot create rigid tech tools. You have to be able to listen to communities, and it's a concurrent monitoring process where you have to listen daily, and you have to have the humility to understand that you may have to change features, capabilities on the run, right? Which is about designing with the communities. Because no amount of in-house testing can replicate the complexities of what implementing technology within communities can sort of throw up, right? It's almost like rubber meeting the road, and you'll be completely bowled by the sort of complexities that you'll see when technology is actually implemented within communities, or solutions when they're implemented with communities. So second is about designing and developing with communities. The third and a very important aspect is not enough thought is given about it, is about how do you build the capacity of communities in terms of leveraging these technology tools, contextualizing the technology tools and solutions to meet the community's needs, and how do they adapt and adopt these technology tools and ensure that they're using it within their context. That's the third part, building the capacity of communities to leverage technology. And fourth, very importantly, is the feedback loops and also the accountability structures, so that the communities and citizens can hold these systems, technologies, and institutions accountable. So these are very, very important aspects we have learned, some even by burning our own hands, right? So, but I think that's fundamentally where we believe you have to shift the power dynamic, you have to shift the power into the hands of communities from a demand side perspective, rather than just looking at technology from a supply side perspective, saying where technology is built for either data dissemination, data information capture, right, rather than data-driven decision making at a community level.
Just wanted to add on open source very quickly. The government of India has free and open source policies. It's not only open source, it's free and open source.
Yes.
FOSS. That's because it also has a political nature, not in the terms of politics, but in the terms of choices. And these policies are implemented also by some states in their public procurement processes, particularly Kerala. And I've written a paper on it. It's available on SSRN. The second point I quickly want to make is that if you open source a facial recognition system which identifies people and then attaches criminality towards it, it does not make that technology democratic. Correct. Open source does not mitigate the purpose of the technology or vary like from a negative to a positive, or does not mitigate the negative itself. Oh, we have open sourced it. Third, there are types and types of open source. When Arogya Setu was claimed to be open source, on SourceForge, which is the government's mirror repository like GitHub, it only posted the front end. It did not post the back end of how it was being built, which was just the app which you can download and decompile from the Play Store. So it's also called open washing, which is why I wanted to, that is the phrase which is used. So I just wanted to put this in context.
Yeah, can I just add one thing, while, and I completely agree with it, it's a minimum standard, but it's also, if you do something terrible and then call it open standard, it doesn't sanction it, but there's also a very important element of, we use the word citizens, communities, people, but there is a very clear class angle to where this collateral damage is allowed and where it will not be acceptable. So something like pensions, the delivery of social security pensions in Rajasthan. Rajasthan has nearly 1 crore pensioners, social security pensioners in the state. As of this year, and it was news, it was banner news in Dainik Bhaskar 2 weeks ago, 20 lakh pensioners who were receiving their pension last year have not been able to successfully verify themselves through biometric or facial recognition, because of which 20% of pensioners are not accessing their pensions. Yeah. So that's a failure rate of 20. How many of us use DigiYatra to travel? Just a show of hands.
It's not shameful. Many people
right?
do. It's not shameful.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I do.
Nobody's judging
I
anyone.
Do. If 10 of us go to the airport and 2 of us are denied, after we've had a ticket, after we've purchased a ticket, we are denied boarding because the tech failed. 3 consecutive days of that happening, there would be enough halla, and they would change the policy. They would take that damn DigiYatra off, or they would change it. Because there is a collateral damage within a class that's not acceptable. There is something that's certainly acceptable for another class. So that's also something that I do want to.
And most times, sorry, one last point is that most times when technology is developed and implemented, it's largely done from a very market lens perspective, saying that, you know, it's a normal product management sort of a thought process, right? You build a product, you take it to the first adopters, then you have the influencers, then you have blah, 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 right? The funnel flows. And that's a very very normalized sort of a standard for general commercial products. You build a product and you believe that if it's adopted quick by a certain set of users, and if it's found enough value, then it will penetrate and it will reach the wider masses. And that same kind of approach and application is done even with technology built for, in the case of social welfare, in the case of services and solutions that impact a large part of the marginalized user groups. And that is the problem, because when we take a market-based approach, there is a segment of the population which often gets missed out or left out, right? They don't adopt these technology tools quick enough. And that, when it happens in the case of social welfare, in the case of services and solutions that are being designed and developed for the most marginalized, it creates disillusionment, it creates disparity, right? And that normalization of the collateral damage is what is finding, real, it needs a real discussion, debate. And that's the biggest problem today.
Before we go to the audience Q&A, I just wanted you all to reflect on, based on where we are at today, what do you see as the way forward, and what are some of the thoughts that you have on how you would see things to be ideally? I mean, we talked about some of those, but there is a certain sort of force with which things are changing with respect to the use of digital technologies. How do you see things evolving, and what is your ideal way of things evolving in the future? If each of you can sort of reflect on that, that'd be really good.
Finally have something hopeful to say. But firstly, I feel yes, going forward, because there is a very clear vested interest to keep this going. There are, like, back to the primary questions of, there are very serious lobbies, very serious vested interests who are benefiting from this, and including some citizens, some people. So I think the requirement to constantly question and interrogate claims, I mean, let us never forget that it is our job to do that, and however much is thrown at us, we have to go back to these primary questions. And I think with tech, many of us have lost our need, our urgent need to be able to constantly interrogating these things that will be coming continuously. I feel in terms of the way how this entire ecosystem is unraveling, it's also, like I mentioned, there are also many efforts that are being put, and these are largely non-state-led efforts of using that same tech and not letting it go, but actually reclaiming that digital technology and saying there is another way possible. And I just want to, because I know we're short of time, I had 2-3 illustrations, but I just want to take one, which is what we saw in the whole advocacy and fight for a legal framework for gig workers. We said it's the same technology, algorithm-aided technology, that so far is benefiting the platforms that have created it. It is hugely benefiting all of us and the lives of convenience that we have, but that same tech is exploiting workers, of not giving them fair allocation of work, hiding information from them, striking at the basis of collective mobilization by individualizing gigs to a superhuman extent. That same tech, and this doesn't have to be the case, the same tech can work for workers. And that's why we fought and won for legislations in Rajasthan, Karnataka, hopefully now in Telangana, Bihar. I mean, now that this conversation has happened, Bihar was the first ruling party government state that actually came out with a law on gig workers, which by far has the most progressive algorithmic disclosure provisions compared to any of the 3 states. What did the law fight for? It's saying, for years, unorganized workers, the burden of registration and the burden of proving that we exist, please register us, put us on a database so that we can get our benefits, it always lies on the worker themselves. Here we said this is the first time, because you track, you digitized every worker, you track every movement of theirs. Why is it that you cannot automatically register a worker and inform the board? This is at least one case where the burden can be shifted from the worker and to the aggregator who's sitting on all this data and is monetizing it. So fights like this. The second of on every transaction, because it is a digital, the work is navigated and mediated through digital tech. At any given point of time, if Vijay is the person, is the Uber driver who has picked me up as a passenger and dropped me to Apar's house, you know the granularity to the extent that Vijay has contributed 200 rupees to Uber, out of which 180 is what he has earned, and a social security welfare cess fee must be charged on this 180. You have used tech to reduce gigs and monitor it. That same tech can be used to also charge a social security contribution for every act of work. You can get record of work because it is now digitally tracked. So there are alternative formulations that we're saying the same tech, if inverted, and can be used by the worker to now look at the aggregator and the platform, it will invert power. And the amount of resistance we saw both from governments and aggregators showed it to us as clear as day, that there is a reason. So that is the power of tech, which is tried to be constrained and withheld, because this is complete for any objective technologist. This would make pure sense. But the reason it was fought against was because it was very clear what its implications are. So there are, I just gave one example, there are so many people who are using tech, the very same tech, to turn the gaze, and I think more of us need to join those efforts as well.
Thank you. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Rakshita said, right, so we have seen on the ground in terms of even during COVID, right, so when local governance, government bodies have used technology in very, very interesting and efficient ways, appropriate ways to solve local problems, right? But they've all been very innovative, very simple, appropriate ways of how local systems have used technology to solve this problem. The point is identifying those solutions and trying to sort of take it across systems, right? And trying to find how a more decentralized approach to support local institutions, local systems are able to use technology to support communities, to solve problems of communities, right? Whether it's grievance redressal, access to social welfare, or any other kind of similar requirements, right? So we've seen many, many cases. In fact, I've got the entire list of them, but I mean, just one example in terms of simple self-registration and G2C, which is government to citizen communication systems for beneficiaries to track their scheme-specific activity and transaction history. We've seen that happen in some of the geographies we worked in, right? That was an absolutely amazing learning even for us in terms of how contextually the local government was able to use our system. And which is what we're saying, that technology is not the problem. It's as good or not good depending on the intent and the person who's using it, right? Or the systems that are using it. And there are just 5 points which Gramani's, again, I re-emphasize these points, which is about ensuring DPIs are conceptualized to solve valid problems, framed by participatory systems, by discussing with communities. 2, do not scale without testing. That's another major problem that we've seen. 3 is feedback and response mechanisms need to be created to ensure that they react to emergent issues, which are listening constantly. 4th, multi-level governance body, which is again horizontal, which are listening to people, listen to communities, listen to citizens, and try to address those problems, right, adhering to those principles. And finally, it's about transparency and public scrutiny, which I think again was already mentioned, which need to be emphasized when we're building and implementing DPIs or technologies.
Thank you. Apart, would you like to add to that in terms of how do we move forward from where we are now, and what do you see as maybe perhaps in the policy and legal regulatory spaces? What do you see?
I'm not a techno-optimist, I'm not a techno-pessimist. I don't believe it is my job here to make you feel happy or sad about the future. I think it is to prompt thought, to make you ask questions, and to give you possibly incomplete, if not incorrect answers, because you will disagree. So what I think will happen immediately will be we'll move to the next wave of technology, and we'll search for it to provide solutions to problems which we know are much deeper. Air pollution will turn towards artificial intelligence to fix air pollution, as it is being done in the city of Bombay through a collaboration with the IIT for a program called MANAS, which will study AQI. As if we do not know What is the reason for air pollution in that city? It may be the foundation of what emerges. It may be due to what's being built there. It's because of the structures of power as they exist. And if you think about all those three phrases with puns, it may be certain builders. Okay? So these problems are deeper. That is why I'm saying, but we'll turn towards AI. And if you look at the AI summit, it has this slogan, happiness for all. Can happiness be there for all? It may be, it sounds like a terrifying word, right? Everyone's happy all the time. But that's what AI, that's what it's supposed to do, right? And this is why I also think that the way technology is impacting more and more, but there's some truth to it. Because technology is impacting more and more people, I think there will be popular articulations of how technology is impacting people, and it has started to happen. When you require biometric authentication and photographs of people who are doing manual labor in order for them to mark attendance in an app, and the server is down, dignity heaped on in lack of dignity, popular articulations will happen. Yes, some manifestos do have portions on digital rights right now, but I believe beyond identity and beyond the social issues which exist, such as environment, education, access to health, technology will become an issue which will have a popular articulation. And I hope this popular articulation includes some of the questions which Neil Postman, who's a media scholar who looked at how television was changing discourse in America. Neil Postman is excellent. You should listen to his lectures. He posed 5 questions on technological change, which I'll quickly read out. And I hope we think about when we deploy a DPI. And we also keep asking every year, because that DPI keeps up taking money, right? Even if it's not available. These are the 5 questions, and I'm reading from his speech which he gave in 1998 in Denver, Colorado, 5 things we need to know about technological change. He states towards the end, first, we always pay a price for technology. The greater the technology, greater the price. Second, there are always winners and losers, and the winners always try to persuade the losers they are really the winners. Yeah? Third, because there are more of us. Who are us? Third, there is embedded in every great technology an epistemological, political, or social prejudice, which means knowledge-based. Sometimes that bias is greatly to our advantage, sometimes it is not. And so on, he takes some examples. Fourth, technological change is not additive, it is ecological, which means it changes everything and is therefore too important to be left entirely in the hands of Bill Gates. And fifth, technology tends to become mythic, that is, it is perceived as the natural order of things and therefore tends to control more of our lives and is good for us. There's a great book on AI, in fact, on OpenAI, which is being written by Karen Howe. You will enjoy it. It's a book which is less policy, more reporting about OpenAI is built. And Karen Howe shows through research how technologies which are shown to be deterministic, that this is the only way you will progress, this is the only technology you need to adopt. She shows through scholarly study, this is not actually the outcome of human history. We have quite often said, no, this doesn't work for us. So this is my hope. These are my closing thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you. We move to the audience questions now. Thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts so far. I'll just go through some of the questions, and whoever wishes can take these questions. Any thoughts on DPI in newer areas such as school and university systems, voter identification, etc.? For example, Samarth, Apar, different Apar, of course, etc.
2 A's.
So, yeah, any thoughts on?
I've written about it. Connects to the national education policy.
Right.
It's part of a wider shift of the classroom into a skill building exercise rather than a critical thinking exercise, and matches existing trends towards, standardization of people being employable, market-based logic. People can drop out of universities, drop in any time. you have a academic bank of credits which adds on to it. It's an entire system. And I ask you to go to the APAR ID website and click on it as well. There are PDFs which inform you. Oh, this is really fun. You should go and check if their privacy policy now has an officer, because there was a blank there when I checked it. So you don't know if your kid, when they enroll into this compulsory system and the data is being gathered there, who do you reach out to ask that is the details of my kid in your system correct? So there was just a blank there. There was no email also. So people should check that. Yeah. So both on terms of why it's happening and are the safeguards being created safely enough, there are big question marks.
Yeah, it is about safeguards, isn't it? For all the systems, all the issues that we've talked about, the guardrails, the safeguards is what is needed. And I mean, I'll just deviate from the questions a little bit, but is there something on the regulatory side that can be sort of done to make sure that these safeguards are in place? Is it just not the willingness to do that, or is it very difficult to do, to have regulations in place to make sure that these systems are accountable? Does anyone have any thoughts on this?
I think as with any technology or any new product, solution or market that's getting created, there's always this debate around, would you want regulations to come in now, or would you want the markets to evolve and let it get shaped as we progress, right? Because again, the market-based approach, because you want those products or services or solutions to get adopted far and wide and quickly, right, for the players to benefit immediately, right, for the returns to sort of be visible. So that's the debate, right? So I think the question is that these guardrails, and if these structures have to be developed, it has to be a pushback. It has to be about how citizens' discussions push systems to sort of build those guardrails, which is why even on AI, there's so many discussions that are happening right now. So many discussions that are happening right now in terms of, AI, systems, the guardrails, the sort of legislation, the data privacy, the data protection. But I think it's about where does the market and the decision-making systems decide, saying that we need to take that call. It's not. I don't think it's about being difficult to implement, at least. The question is that who does it benefit and when and who, where.
Right. Yeah, it's also about in some sense, the power structure and who is accountable for whom and so on. So the next question is, DPI has problems, but has it led to greater exclusions than before? Can you give any examples of negative implications of Arogya Setu, Digiyatra, etc., including ownership of data with private entities and so on?
I'll pass. I've covered this. I'm sorry. I can share off stage. I don't want to take up time.
Your opinions on greater use and intrusion of digital technologies into personal space, for example, well-being, diet, etc., like fitness trackers and so on. This is slightly different from what we are talking about, but anything that...
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can take a bunch of questions, but it's true. I mean, that those are not how... I mean, gamification has really become a normal, and how much of it is actually, how much of it is prompting us to walk those 10,000 steps because it is really good for our health, and where does that boundary blur to we're actually now beginning to consume in the manner that it's benefiting something greater than us. So those are questions, and I think one can't juridify those questions. As a society, one has to evolve through it, go through it, but it's also in terms of again, like we said, that your previous question of what is the positive harm that is being done by DPI, and again the idea is all of this DPI, and we were discussing it during the chat we had before we came on, all of it was introduced in the name of there was inefficiency in the past. Yes. There were deserving people who were excluded. Yes. There were ineligible people who were in the system. There are delays, there's pilferage. Hence, manual systems need to go out, human discretion needs to go out. We need to bring automation where there's no manual human discretion, and there'll be the greatest efficiency ever. That was the story that was sold to us to have all of this introduced. Now when this is introduced, and again there is a set of people who are out, somebody must be answerable to that, because it's the very same set of people who are left out in the previous framework, and the better off have still managed to climb through this, however inefficient, laborious, contraindicative framework. They managed to get back on it and have produced the 10 documents you needed to show that one is visible. Again 20%, 18% are left out. So if this system didn't work for the worst of, if this system did not deliver on what you said it would deliver, then somebody has to be held accountable for that, because we have spent crores of rupees developing this system saying that things would be perfected. So that question does need to be asked, and again the burden of proof has to be on them to show that this was better than anything else we have done before, and it can't be on us to bring cases, which we are continuously bringing. And we're going to the collectorate office, we're going to state governments, and we are seeing government officers actually incapacitated saying this must go all the way to Delhi because this needs to be changed in the tech.
Just very quickly on this, on health and tracking and tech. Delhi as a city has an AQI sometimes greater than 1,000, which lasts for weeks. The water has ammonia in it, and water, like there's so much normalization, and we have to think about the tech quite often from like multiple artifacts, right? Air purifier is tech actually, right? And it links to your point. I quite often think if I'm this sick living in that city constantly, what's happening to people who are doing manual labor? And we need to think about it. The second part to this is there shouldn't be any coercion to this kind of tracking, okay? And also there needs to be oversight, because sometimes there are products and services which are being introduced in a manner in which the data gathering, but also the product recommendations or the product solutions which are being offered are not correct and will really impact people and their health. And this is not being done properly, because there's also so much recourse people have started taking to chatbots, large language models for mental health advice, okay? As well as for offloading their cognitive work. Studies after studies, MIT studies, both ECG, testing the essay answers, it's showing that people who are using ChatGPT, their neural corrections are going down, their memory is getting short. Studies of, like Swiss Business School is showing 666 participants, it's showing that like people degrade in their ability to speak and write if they keep using LLMs. And it starts by you writing an email in an automated way. So I think so, this needs to be considered. It is a public priority. We should think about it, especially from the perspective of AI. This is not to say tech is all bad. I use a large amount of it in my life, right? And now a lot of people do. In fact, I think India is one of the countries in which Apple Watches are really sold a lot. I think I read some statistics, like it's a country in which Apple Watches are really, really popular. Smartwatches are really, really popular compared to other South Asian countries. So, but yet at the same time, again, I think when we think about technology, we have to think about the large bulk of people, right? And when we think about health, again, we have to think about the basic democratic duty of our governments and whether they are being able to provide it. We shouldn't only think about trackers, because quite often we are introducing all of it because the air, water, and food is bad.
One last question, and we will end the session today with, of course, concluding thoughts from all of you. And I think this is something that that was talked about, but if you would like, any of you would like to answer, one positive example of DPI from each of you. I know, after all of this, I think it's a sort of a...
Yeah, so I have one more,
yes.
that because the one promise that digitization and digitalization of records does really bring, and it's an inherent promise, is that once it is digitized and brought onto a central system, yes, we have questions on why it needs to be centralized, what is the purpose for which this data, collect only that data that's relevant. But once you have it, all it takes is to turn it outward, that whatever then the state can see, the people should be able to see. So transparency of records is the bare minimum that a digital infrastructure that's recording, digitizing information should be able to deliver on. And we saw that in Rajasthan when there were lots of exclusions that were created because living people were declared dead. Because there was a requirement of meeting targets of those, I mean, all postal accounts had to be converted into bank accounts in order to now get pensions, and there was a lot of pressure on frontline functionaries who had to meet targets, and all of this is again reported. I'm not going to take time. There are tribunal reports, there are public hearing reports in which it's been shared, that because of that pressure, denominators had to be reduced, and those who did not have, those who hadn't actually converted their postal accounts to bank accounts were just deleted and said that it's because they are dead. And when we went to different places, we saw names of these people appearing as grievances saying we used to get pension, now it's stopped. That's when we started really following this trail of, well, somebody deleted them digitally, somebody has a record of who was there before, who got deleted, what is the cause of deletion, why is this information known only to government? This must be known to people so that if my name is deleted and the reason is said that I'm marked as dead, I must go and present myself and say that clearly I'm not dead, restart my pension. So that was the fight for what emerged in Rajasthan as the Jan Suchna portal, which we fully believe is the portal was only possible because all of that information was digitized. If we were in an analog era where there were 15 registers in every panchayat, we could not reach this level of transparency. Jan Suchna portal was launched in September 2016. To date, it has more than 15 crore hits on that portal. That portal does not do anything but show information. You can't file an application, you can't file a grievance, you can only see. Yeah. And that is the hunger for information, and that portal was not gifted away to citizens by a benevolent state, it was fought for. Dharnas took place asking for this information कि ये सूचना हमारे आपकी नहीं किसी के बाप की. Just because it's digitized, how can it be hidden away from us? Through a digital dialogue process that took place with civil society and government, those records also came out that it's not just a switch you can switch on and say what was opaque is now visible. The manner in which it has to be also disclosed is to be in an accessible manner. So digital dialogues took place, and now information of more than 350 schemes in Rajasthan is proactively disclosed on Jan Suchna portal. It's a government run portal, paid for by public funds, because we feel that's where public funds, this is the kind of a DPI public funds must be put to, and that DPI was conceptualized, fought for by people and accepted by the state. So there are examples, and after Rajasthan did it, Karnataka did it called it Mahiti Kanaja. Telangana is trying to build one and calling it Praja Suchna. But now all of this now is under threat because of the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which is now saying if it's digital, it must be hidden because we have to protect people's privacy. So it's one battle after another.
Such a good movie. You would like to add anything or?
No, I think she's covered. I mean, the more important part is that, again, we're not techno pessimists, right? So we use technology, we work with technology, and we've seen that millions of people have indeed benefited with even the JAM Trinity, right? So which we are obviously citing problems about, but there have been millions who have benefited from it. There are millions who are benefiting in terms of livelihood that we are seeing in terms of using UPI, right? Yeah. So by onboarding them to digital platforms, they're getting newer ways for livelihood, income, pathways to improve their own livelihoods. So there's definitely a lot of positive, a lot of good as well. But what we're only saying is that you cannot take a tech-only approach, right? Especially when you're dealing with population segments who have leapfrogged this intermediary sort of layer where other countries have had in terms of using computers and systems, right? So here there's a large part of the population which are only mobile first and mobile only, right, in terms of their access and exposure to technology. And when you're building these systems, it is the guardrails, these support structures, the accountability structures that need to be strengthened to ensure that they do not get excluded because The moment you take a tech-only approach, you're leading to a significant amount of exclusion and disparity and disillusionment. And that's fundamentally what we are questioning, and not about the use of technology. And which is why DPI, I think, in every case that we're talking about, there have been amazing stories of change, impact, and benefits. But what we're saying is that the last man standing who we have to ensure when we're building these technology tools should not be left behind. And that's fundamentally what we're fighting for.
I think the foundational technology which has helped us tremendously, which I said even initially, and it should be called a digital public infrastructure, is the internet. And united across governments, there's been a concentrated effort towards ensuring universalization. We have gone from 2014 to 2024, I think so, with the 300% increase from about 24 odd, 21 crore odd connections to about more than 100 crore. But it's not a good note to, because if you look at the data a little much more closely, a city like Delhi has a tele-density, its recorded population of about 3.4, but does every person in Delhi have 3.4 connections? No. One person may have 6 connections actually with a smart car or like a wristwatch or phone or with an office connection. And one family may just have 1. And there's also a gender and in rural areas it's even less. And the little bit of a issue is that, especially for broadband access, the number around 100 crore has kind of become static. In some quarters it's even decreased, which shows that maybe we've achieved saturation. How many connections people could buy, they have bought them, and the drop-offs and the drop-ons in terms of connections rather than users is now equal or marginal in some ways. So I would say universalization of access towards the internet is something which should be considered a digital public infrastructure in our conception of digital public infrastructure. It has been done well in the past, we should continue towards it.
On that note, I would like to end today's session thanking the panelists for sharing their sort of knowledge and experience with all of us. I have learned a lot today, and I hope that's true of all of you as well. And we'll close the session here. We can a round of applause for the speakers. And I invite Preetham to give a vote of thanks, please. Yeah, go ahead.
As we conclude today's meet, we extend our sincere thanks to the PIC team for the auditorium and the PIC staff for their support and cooperation. We are grateful to the distinguished panelists, Rakshita Swami, Vijay Sai Pratap, and Apar Gupta for their valuable insights. Our thanks to Sri Hari to moderating the discussion so effectively, and to Jai for the warm welcome. We sincerely appreciate Aditya and his team for videography and for managing the online screening seamlessly. To the friends, family, and well-wishers of Girish sir, thank you for being with us today, and to the team at Prayas for organizing the event and making it possible. Finally, we extend our sincere thanks to our audience present here today and joining us online for your time, engagement, and participation. Thank you all for being part of this occasion.